For over 60 years, Ernest Borgnine was a constant, comforting, and powerful presence on our screens. With that trademark, gap-toothed grin and a voice that could shift from a gentle rumble to a terrifying roar, he was Hollywood's ultimate everyman. He was the lovable, bumbling commander in McHale's Navy, the sensitive soul who broke our hearts in Marty, and the menacing villain who haunted our nightmares. He could be a hero, a brute, a clown, or a friend, and in every role, he brought an unshakable authenticity that audiences just adored. He was a working man's actor, a star who felt like one of us, someone who had earned his place through sheer talent and grit. But beneath that friendly, bear-like exterior was a man forged in the crucible of the Great Depression and World War II. He was a man of principle, with a rigid code of conduct that he applied to every part of his life, especially his work. He valued discipline, respect, and above all, professionalism. He saw acting not as some glamorous gig, but as a craft, a job to be done with dedication and honor. And while he built a reputation as one of the most reliable and beloved figures in the industry, he carried a private list, not of enemies, but of professional sins he just couldn't stand for. For decades, Borgnine showed a friendly face to the world, but he saw behaviors on set that violated his deepest principles. He witnessed arrogance, disrespect, and a shocking lack of discipline from some of Hollywood's biggest names. He kept his own counsel for most of his life, but now the stories are coming to light. This isn't about actors he personally despised, with a burning passion, but about the behaviors he found unforgivable and the stars whose on-set conduct he refused to tolerate. This isn't a story of petty celebrity feuds. It's the story of a man's unshakable professional code and the moments when Hollywood's titans fell short. For decades, Ernest Borgnine was one of Hollywood's most respected and beloved tough guys, but behind that friendly smile was a man who never forgot a betrayal of his professional code. He worked with legends, but there were some whose behavior he privately found contemptible. Now, for the first time, we're uncovering the stories about the co-stars whose on-set actions created a tension so palpable it became legendary, and the incidents that fueled his lifelong commitment to a specific brand of Hollywood integrity. And Ernest Borgnine became, you have to know where he came from. Born Ernest Borgnine in 1917 to Italian immigrants in Connecticut, his early life wasn't shaped by dreams of Hollywood, but by the stark realities of the American working class. His parents split when he was just 2, and he spent a few years in Italy with his mother before returning to a nation gripped by the Great Depression. These were formative years of struggle, where the value of a hard day's work wasn't a choice. It was a necessity for survival. He drove trucks, he worked in factories, learning early on the importance of discipline. Nothing in his youth suggested a future on the silver screen. His high school yearbook was filled with sports, not drama. He was a physical, competitive young man. Then, in 1935, looking for direction and a steady paycheck, he made a decision that would define him. He joined the United States Navy. This wasn't a brief tour. Borgnine's naval career spanned about a decade. He served for 6 years, was discharged, but then re-enlisted just 2 months after Pearl Harbor, feeling he couldn't sit on the sidelines while his country was at war. He served on an anti-submarine warfare ship, patrolling the treacherous Atlantic coast. 10 years in the military instills a certain kind of order. It forges a deep understanding of hierarchy, discipline, and camaraderie. You learn that ego is a liability, and disrespect can be dangerous. When he was honorably discharged in 1945 as a gunner's mate first class, those principles were etched into his very being. Back home in Connecticut, Borgnine was adrift. The structure of the military was gone, and he had no clear path. As he told it after a few weeks of his mother patting him on the back for his service, she finally asked, "Well, are you going to get a job or what?" In that moment of uncertainty, his mother made a suggestion that changed everything. "You always like getting in front of people and making a fool of yourself," she told him. "Why don't you give it a try?" A light switched on. He enrolled in the Randall School of Drama in Hartford for a 6-month course. It was an unlikely path for a 28-year-old Navy vet, and casting directors were initially baffled. His face, they said, was too mean for comedy and too funny for drama. But Borgnine, with that Navy tenacity, persisted. He scrubbed sets and sewed costumes just to be a part of the theater world. He made his stage debut in State of the Union in 1947 and eventually landed on Broadway in Harvey in 1949. This foundation, a decade of military discipline and the rigor of live theater, was the bedrock of his career. It created a man with zero tolerance for anyone who didn't take the job seriously. In 1953, Ernest Borgnine landed the role that would change everything. He was cast as the sadistic Staff Sergeant Fatso Judson in the monumental film From Here to Eternity. The movie was a huge deal, with an all-star cast including Burt Lancaster, Montgomery Clift, and Deborah Kerr. For Borgnine, this was his big break. His character, Fatso, was a chilling portrait of cruelty, a bully who relentlessly torments Private Angelo Maggio. This role would solidify his reputation as one of Hollywood's most formidable villains. Playing opposite him as Maggio was Frank Sinatra, and it's here that the legend of Borgnine's first big on-set clash begins. But the story isn't one of outright hatred, as rumor would have it. It was a complex dynamic rooted in the immense professional pressure both men were under. Borgnine was the rising character actor, desperate to make his mark. Sinatra, on the other hand, was a superstar fighting for his career. His singing voice had faltered, his film contracts had dried up, and this movie was his shot at redemption. He took the role of Maggio for a paltry $8,000, determined to claw his way back to the top. That desperation fueled an incredible intensity on set. Borgnine said both he and Sinatra were frightened to death during their scenes. They were two guys with everything to prove, and that fear translated into raw, electrifying performances. Borgnine recalled that Sinatra was anything but an arrogant star. He was patient, hard-working, and completely dedicated because he knew his entire future was on the line. The idea of a swaggering Sinatra looking down on Borgnine just wasn't true. In fact, Borgnine described him as a regular human being. Their on-screen dynamic was brutal. The conflict between the sadistic Fatso and the resilient Maggio is one of the film's most powerful elements. Borgnine's portrayal was so convincing that it bled into the off-screen atmosphere. Some reports claim Sinatra avoided him off camera, not from personal dislike, but because the scenes were just that draining. Borgnine's performance was so potent that some audience members even sent him death threats. Despite the on-screen animosity, professionally, it was all respect. In a 2009 interview, Borgnine spoke with immense pride about Sinatra's comeback, which was cemented when he won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. "I was just so proud of him," Borgnine said. Sources indicate the two remained on good terms for years, even sharing a laugh when Borgnine jokingly reprised his Fatso role for a roast of Sinatra. So if there was no real feud, what was the issue? For Borgnine, the experience on From Here to Eternity wasn't about hating Frank Sinatra. It was about setting a professional standard. He saw a superstar humble himself and pour every ounce of his being into a role to save his career. That became Borgnine's benchmark. He had witnessed what a true professional does when their back is against the wall. Any actor who failed to meet that standard of commitment would inevitably fall short in his eyes. The clash with Sinatra wasn't the start of a grudge. It was the birth of the Borgnine Code. 2 years after From Here to Eternity, Ernest Borgnine found himself on another high-stakes set, the neo-Western thriller Bad Day at Black Rock. His performance as Fatso Judson had made him Hollywood's go-to heavy. In this film, he played Coley Trimble, one of the menacing townspeople hiding a CIA dark secret from a one-armed stranger. That stranger was played by a man who wasn't just a star, but a Hollywood institution, Spencer Tracy. Working with Tracy was a totally different challenge. If Sinatra was his peer in pressure, Tracy was his superior in status. At 54, Tracy was a two-time Oscar winner, a legend known for his naturalistic, no-nonsense style. For the 37-year-old Borgnine, sharing the screen with him was intimidating. The on-set dynamic wasn't about friendship. It was a professional test. Tracy was the established king, and Borgnine was the powerful up-and-comer who had to prove he belonged. The tension between them is electric in the film, especially in a now iconic fight scene. In the story, Tracy's one-armed character has to defend himself against Borgnine's much larger, brutish Trimble. Borgnine, ever the pro, was concerned about making it look believable. He went to the director, John Sturgis, and asked, "Here, I am a husky guy, and I got a one-armed fella here that I'm supposed to be fighting. Has anybody thought about judo?" He then worked with a stuntman to choreograph a realistic sequence. The filming of that fight was intense. On set in Lone Pine, California, temperatures soared past 100 degrees. During one take, Borgnine went down, and another. Prop blood in his hand, Borgnine hit his own nose, sending fake blood everywhere. From the sidelines, he heard Tracy exclaim, "Jesus Christ, they killed him!" The moment was so realistic it startled the veteran actor, a clear sign of Borgnine's full-throttle commitment. Tracy was known for being a scene stealer, and Borgnine watched him work like a hawk. He recalled a scene between Tracy and Robert Ryan where Tracy delivered his lines while looking at the ground. Borgnine was confused at first, then he realized the genius of it. By making such a subtle, unusual choice, Tracy was drawing every eye in the room to him. It was a masterclass in screen presence, and Borgnine was taking notes. One day, Borgnine was leaving the set early for an audition. Tracy stopped him in his typical gruff, kidding-on-the-square way. Hey, where the hell are you going?" he said. "If anybody leaves here early, it's me. I'm a star." When Borgnine explained he was reading for a film called Marty, Tracy's demeanor softened. He gave his blessing, saying, "Don't worry about it. It'll be a cinch. You go ahead and do it." When Borgnine returned the next morning, smiling because he'd gotten the part, Tracy knew instantly. "See, you got the part, huh?" he said. "Ah, that's a boy. I knew you'd do it." The professional respect had been earned. A year later, in a twist of fate, Ernest Borgnine won the Academy Award for Best Actor for Marty, beating out his former co-star Spencer Tracy. It was the ultimate validation. By the 1970s, Ernest Borgnine was an established Oscar-winning star who had seen it all. But nothing could have fully prepared him for one of the decade's biggest blockbusters, the disaster epic, The Poseidon Adventure. Cast as Detective Lieutenant Mike Rogo, a tough, cynical cop, Borgnine was the fiery counterpoint to Gene Hackman's heroic Reverend Scott. And playing his equally tough, mouthy wife, Linda, was the one and only Shelley Winters. The stories of on-set tension between Borgnine and Winters are legendary, but just like the Sinatra feud, the reality is more nuanced than pure hate. It wasn't two actors who despised each other, but two powerhouse personalities, both deeply committed to their craft, clashing under incredibly difficult filming conditions. The production of The Poseidon Adventure was physically grueling. The actors performed many of their own stunts in precarious waterlogged sets that were tilted at stomach-churning angles. It was demanding and often dangerous. Shelley Winters, preparing for her role as a former swimming champion, trained with an Olympic coach and famously gained 35 pounds to more convincingly play the part. She was all in, and her intensity was a force of nature. Winters was known for being demanding and outspoken. Borgnine, the consummate professional who prized order and discipline, found her unpredictability a challenge. Their on-screen relationship as Mike and Linda Rogo was defined by loud arguments, a dynamic that likely mirrored some of their off-screen interactions. They were two strong-willed actors who, as one observer put it, would pull out a lot of stops in order to outact one another at times. Yet, this was no toxic feud. Borgnine admitted that while Winters could be difficult, she was also undeniably talented. He recognized her commitment and the power she brought to her Oscar-nominated performance. Theirs was a clash of professional styles. He was the steady, disciplined leader. She was the volatile, immersive force. During breaks, actor Jack Albertson, who played Winters' husband, would play gin rummy with her, a small detail that points to a more collegial set than the legends suggest. In the end, their professional friction translated into cinematic gold. The bickering, passionate relationship between Mike and Linda Rogo is one of the film's emotional anchors. The fact that they reunited 10 years later for an episode of The Love Boat suggests the on-set feud was more a product of intense work and clashing methods than any lasting hatred. For Borgnine, it reinforced a key tenet of his code. You don't have to be best friends with your co-stars, but you must respect their talent and commitment. While Ernest Borgnine could handle difficult personalities, there were certain behaviors he simply could not tolerate. His code, forged in the Navy and live theater, was built on discipline, respect for the entire crew, and a blue-collar work ethic. Actors who violated this code through arrogance or laziness earned his quiet but firm disapproval. A prime example was his experience with Tony Curtis on the 1958 epic, The Vikings. The film was a massive production, starring Kirk Douglas, Janet Leigh, and Borgnine as the Viking king Ragnar. While Borgnine deeply respected Kirk Douglas for his grace and leadership, he had a different view of Curtis. In Borgnine's eyes, Curtis embodied a superficial, pretty boy approach to acting that grated against his own gritty style. He felt Curtis was more concerned with his movie star image than being a dedicated teammate. This wasn't personal. Dislike. It was a fundamental disagreement on what it meant to be an actor. For Borgnine, the work was everything. For Curtis, it seemed, the image was just as important. The two never worked together again. This was the core of the Borgnine code. He had worked his way up from nothing. He had served his country, paid his dues, and respected every single person on a film set, from the director to the lighting grip. Actors who behaved like divas, who were lazy, or who mistreated the crew, these were the people he could not forgive, professionally. To see what he truly valued, you only need to look at his experience working with another Hollywood legend, Bette Davis. They worked together twice, and Borgnine was in awe of her professionalism. He recalled how on their first day of shooting together, the director was in a foul mood and chewing out the actors. When the director walked away, Borgnine, nervous to be working with a titan like Davis, suggested a change in the scene's timing. Davis didn't pull rank. She listened. "Let's try it," she said. They worked it out, and it was perfect. To Borgnine, that was the mark of a true pro. She had no ego. It was all about making the picture better. As he put it, she came prepared. Knew your lines, her lines, everybody's lines. It was for the picture. It was everything that a pro could want. His hate was never a petty emotion. It was a principled stand against the arrogance and unprofessionalism that he felt betrayed the very craft he held so dear. To truly understand Ernest Borgnine's code, it's essential to look at the actors he deeply admired. His disapproval of some stars wasn't born of jealousy. It was the flip side of the profound respect he shared with those he considered true professionals. Chief among these was his bond with Lee Marvin. They were titans of the tough guy genre, and they were kindred spirits. Like Borgnine, Marvin was a World War II veteran, having served as a Marine in the Pacific. That shared experience forged an immediate and lasting bond. On the set of Emperor of the North. They played fierce adversaries, but off-screen, their relationship was one of deep mutual respect. They were two pros at the top of their game, pushing each other to be better. Borgnine also held a deep and lasting affection for his co-stars on the sitcom McHale's Navy. He particularly adored Tim Conway, who played the bumbling Ensign Parker. He marveled at Conway's comedic genius and kindness, and their friendship endured for decades. The set of McHale's Navy was the antithesis of a toxic environment. It was a place of camaraderie, laughter, and ensemble work, the very values Borgnine cherished. He also spoke with great warmth about Michael Landon, with whom he worked on Little House on the Prairie. He described Landon as one of a kind, the nicest, most loving human being you've ever seen in your life. He admired Landon's dedication, noting that there was no put-on about him. He did his work, and he did it right, and he enjoyed it every minute of the way. This praise for men like Marvin, Conway, and Landon shows what Borgnine was really looking for in a co-star. Not a friend, necessarily, but a partner in the work. He respected authenticity, hard work, and a genuine love for the craft. His so-called feuds were never about personal animosity. They were the quiet, principled judgments of a man who had earned his place and expected others to show the same respect for the profession that he did. If you enjoyed hearing the real stories behind a Hollywood legend, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell for more truths from the Golden Age and beyond. And we want to hear from you. Which classic Hollywood stars' secret feuds and friendships should we investigate next? Let us know in the comments below. Ernest Borgnine's legacy is far more complex than a list of actors he did or didn't like. He was a man of contrasts, the face of a villain with the heart of a poet, a beloved TV clown who was also a deeply serious dramatic actor. He was a product of a bygone era, a time when professionalism was paramount and respect was earned, not given. The title of this video might suggest a man who held on to bitter grudges, but the truth is much more profound. Ernest Borgnine didn't hate Frank Sinatra. He respected his fight and used it as a benchmark for professional dedication. He didn't despise Shelley Winters. He navigated her powerful personality and acknowledged her immense talent. His conflicts weren't with people, but with principles. He was intolerant of arrogance because he came from humble beginnings. He disdained laziness because he had worked tirelessly for everything he achieved. He was repulsed by disrespect because his decade in the Navy had taught him the value of every link in the chain of command. His story isn't one of hope,